Let's begin with prayer. Holy One, open my eyes that I may see glimpses of truth you have for me. Place in my hands that wonderful key that shall unclamp and set me free. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. Our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Last Sunday, we kind of quietly began a 5-week preaching series on the book of Job. In the narrative lectionary during the summer months, we take the opportunity to look at books of the Bible that don't easily fit into a logical narrative storytelling arc from creation through the Acts of the Apostles. Normally, as we move into a series like this, we would start with a broader introduction of the book, but since we heard from a guest preacher, we didn't really do that last week. So I thought I might start there before narrowing in on today's reading. The storyline in the book of Job doesn't point to anything that lets it be easily placed in time, which is fine because we don't really need to set it in context in order to understand it. It combines fictional prose and verse, drawing from several similar stories from Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Canaan. The opening sentence, "There once was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job," is kind of like the ancient Near East version of "Once upon a time in a galaxy far, far away," making it clear from the beginning that this is going to be a tall tale that's supposed to teach us something. There's no piece of earth that was once known as Uz that we know of. Job isn't supposed to have contributed to the lineage of some important person. Job doesn't even appear to be Jewish. It's just the tale of a righteous man who falls on hard times. The prominent Hebrew Bible scholar, Walter Brueggemann, says, "The book of Job is not for everyday use among the faithful, but is an artistic extremity that is peculiarly matched to those extreme crises of life lived in faith." In other words, it seems to have been written for such a time as this. The Babylonian exile, the Crusades, the bubonic plague, any instance of slavery since the beginning of time till now. World War I, the Great Depression, the Holocaust, HIV/AIDS, 9/11, the seemingly never-ending killing of Black people for the crime of simply not being white. The most extreme crises of life lived in faith. In the early morning hours of June 12th, 2016, a 29-year-old security guard killed 49 people and wounded 53 others in a mass shooting inside a gay nightclub in Orlando, Florida. An incident that we call the Pulse nightclub shooting because there are too many mass shootings in this country to remember them all without naming them. Pulse was hosting a Latin night, so most of the victims were not only gay, but Latinx as well. It is the deadliest incident in the history of violence against LGBTQ+ people in the United States, and the deadliest terrorist attack in the US since 9/11. At the time, it was also the deadliest mass shooting by a single gunman in US history, but that record has unfortunately been broken. On the evening of May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was arrested for allegedly passing a counterfeit $20 bill at a grocery store in the Powderhorn Park neighborhood of Minneapolis. According to the store clerk, the bill was an obvious fake, and Floyd refused to return the purchased cigarettes when challenged. Floyd was handcuffed face down in the street while 3 officers restrained him and a 4th prevented onlookers from intervening. At that time, one of the officers restraining him pressed his knee into Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. For the last 3 of those minutes, Floyd was motionless and had no pulse, but the officers made no attempt to revive him. The official autopsy classified Floyd's death as a homicide attributed to cardiopulmonary arrest caused by subdual and restraint. The most extreme crises of life lived in faith. Despite Brueggemann's claim that the Book of Job is not for everyday use among the faithful, it has strangely become ubiquitous in culture, even among the unfaithful. I would venture a guess that there is at least one thing that everybody thinks they know about Job. Can you tell me what that is?
That he suffered extremely.
That he suffered. What else? What do we say about that suffering?
That he had great patience.
That he had great patience.
That he was righteous before God.
That he was righteous before God. The 2 most famous things about Job, from a Christian perspective, are the idea of the patience of Job, which is strongest in the prologue, which we read last week, and also chapter 19, verse 25, for I know that my Redeemer lives, which we will get to next week. By focusing on Job's patience, the Christian audience is able to focus on a Christ-like witness to the promise of resurrection for those who endure suffering faithfully. Does anyone other than me find that perspective problematic? Yes, I see heads shaking. Why?
He seems unmoved by the suffering of his family and all of the creatures who died because of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not only can this kind of thinking lead to a theology that fetishizes suffering, but in order to focus on Job's patience, it also requires that we completely ignore all of the impatience, anger, and rebellion that makes up the majority of the book. So if it's not about patience, then what? What do you think the point of this story is?
Faithfulness.
Faithfulness.
Well, I think it speaks of how Job persisted in his protest until he finally ran out. And then God spoke. But he said everything he wanted to say and more.
Yep.
Suffering
Often.
is not earned.
Say that again.
Suffering is not earned.
Suffering is not earned. That's exactly right. Often the easy answer that we get to this question is that it's about theodicy, or the complication of the existence of evil. If God exists, why do bad things happen to good people? And it's not that it's not about that. It is, in a way, but it's more than that, as you mentioned. In the past several weeks that we've been discussing Job during scripture conversation, we keep coming back to the question of whether or not that's all this book is. Some kind of answer to this question, or at least the acknowledgement of it. I think it was last week when Judy Andrews said, It's more like an acknowledgement that bad things happen and there's not really a reason why. In really digging into this book, I found out something interesting. Job is one of the longest books in the Hebrew Bible, 42 chapters. And throughout all of that, only 2 chapters are concerned with the why. These 2 chapters make up the prologue of the story. Another half of a chapter serves as a kind of epilogue to the story to wrap it up into a nice bow. That leaves 39 and a half chapters in between. The life that is lived between the bad stuff and the reparation. This isn't a book about why bad things happen. This is a book about when bad things happen. How do we respond? June 12th, 2016 was a Sunday. Specifically, it was the Sunday of the Tony Awards that year. Now, since we just finished a 7-week study about finding faith through musical theater, I wonder if anyone has a guess what show was favored to win most of the musical awards that year.
The Book of Mormon?
Not the Book of Mormon.
Chicago?
Oh, way more recent than Chicago.
Hamilton.
Hamilton.
Oh, Hamilton.
That morning, Hamilton creator Lin-Manuel Miranda woke up to the news of the Pulse nightclub shooting. I knew that this was both going to be a day of celebrating all of the work we did with Hamilton to get it to Broadway, and a day of unimaginable tragedy for our country. And we were going to be on TV, he said. I knew I had to prepare something, but here's the thing. So much of writing is just about meeting the moment as honestly as possible.
And the Tony goes to Hamilton, music and lyrics by Lin-Manuel Miranda.
This marks the second Tony for original score for composer and lyricist Lin-Manuel Miranda. He won the award in 2008 for In the Heights.
I'm not freestyling, I'm too old. I wrote you a sonnet instead.
Yes!
My wife's the reason anything gets done. She nudges me towards promise by degrees. She is a perfect symphony of one. Our son is her most beautiful reprise. We chase the melodies that seem to find us until they're finished songs and start to play. When senseless acts of tragedy remind us that nothing here is promised. Not one day. The show is proof that history remembers. We live through times when hate and fear seem stronger. We rise and fall and light from dying embers, remembrances that hope and love last longer. And love is 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 love, cannot be killed or swept aside. I sing Vanessa's symphony, Eliza tells her story. Now fill the world with music, love, and pride. Thank you so much for this.
Darnella Frazier is a 17-year-old high school senior who was present at the time of George Floyd's arrest. When she saw what was happening, she pulled out her cell phone and never stopped recording for 10 minutes. In a recent interview in the Star Tribune, her attorney said, She had no idea she would witness and document one of the most important and high-profile police murders in American history. She wasn't trying to be a hero. She was simply meeting the moment that she found herself in as honestly as possible. By the morning of May 26th, Darnella's video had gone viral. I had class that morning. It was 8:15 a.m. in Minneapolis, and that's what dominated the conversation. By the end of class, the local students were making plans to walk together at the protest that was already scheduled for later that day. We are now in the 20th day of nonstop protests against the use of excessive force by police officers against Black suspects and the lack of police accountability in over 400 cities throughout all 50 US states, as well as internationally. In our reading today, we see Job curse the day that he was born. And honestly, who among us hasn't had that day? That day when everything goes so wrong, we just think it might have been better if we had never been born. It's central. Job is experiencing what we might today call depression. The next thing that we read is his friend, Eliphaz, come to try to reason with him, reminding him of the good things that he's done. And he may not have said the right thing, but he showed up, which is more than can be said about a lot of people. And I do want to take a minute to point out that Eliphaz is not the only friend who shows up in this story. Job does have a total of 4 friends who come to speak with him, though we will be skipping that in these next weeks. Of course, Job doesn't feel better. Why should he? His world has been upended. He is lamenting. But his friends come anyway. They don't know what to say exactly, but they do their best to meet the moment as honestly as possible. I'd heard love is love before, and I just wanted to double, triple, quadruple, quintuple, sextuple, septuple, octuple down on it, Lin-Manuel Miranda said of his acceptance speech. And I was so very moved to see it popping up on signs and on churches. And if me stringing those words together helped someone, then I'm very, very grateful. The Apple TV series Dear details just how much Miranda's response to this tragedy meant to one person.
Dear Lynn, my name is Dylan and I'm 19 years old. I live in a small town in the Bible Belt of Tennessee.
Hunting and football are really big here, but musical theater isn't. Been there.
I love theater, and I was bullied a lot in high school because of it. It was really hard for me because I had no safe place where I could be myself. I always had to hide who I was. People already didn't accept me, so I thought there was no way I could tell anyone that I was gay. But then I saw you win the Tony for Hamilton in 2016. You took the opportunity to speak out against bigotry and homophobia. Up to that point, I've been too scared to come out. But you gave me the courage to find my voice and be the person I truly am inside. So I put on your song, My Shot from Hamilton, and sat down at my computer and poured my heart out. And then I posted it onto social media.
You sang about seizing opportunity and owning the moment in hopes for a brighter future.
That's exactly what I did. And for the first time, I was me. It was liberating. Not everyone was okay with it, and that was hard. A few days later, something truly amazing happened. Someone from my school who I barely knew read my post and texted me to tell me he was going through the same thing. Other people in my town started confiding in me, telling me I gave them the courage and strength to come out too.
So many people around me were hiding who they were, just like I had been, but because you helped me find my inner strength, I could help other people find theirs.
Now I wear my gay pride pin every day. I'm in college studying musical theater, and I'm also a teaching assistant for English lit classes. Because I've created a safe, welcoming environment where it's okay to be who you are, I've had many students actually come out to me during my office hours. Now I am an advocate for both gay rights and all human rights.
I want everyone to know that it's okay to be yourself and follow your passion, whatever it may be.
Thank you, Lynn, for helping me and countless others follow our hearts, stand up for ourselves, and bring more love and equality into the world.
Now, before we go any further, I think it's time that I tell you that I'm not going to tell you how the book of Job ends. I'm going to leave you hanging. Because what's the point of a preaching series otherwise? And really, that's fitting, because we don't fully know how the George Floyd story ends either. We're still in the middle of it. That long middle part, 39 and a half chapters, has only just begun. Right now, we're at the time of lament. But we've shown up. We don't always know what to say, but we show up anyway, trying to meet the moment as honestly as possible. And though we're scared to become too optimistic, for the first time since the 60s, it seems that maybe we might see some real change. Only time will tell. But for the moment we lament, we curse the day that we were born, and we string some words together in the hopes that they might help someone somewhere. May it be so.